Hey folks, this is Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalist, and in this video I'm going to be talking about flood preparedness, especially given what's been happening recently in UK. I'm on the other side of where most floods are taking place, in Britain. I'm on the other side of the Irish Sea in Ireland, so we're pretty much good. There's yeah, it's been raining and such, but we haven't had any serious flooding, at least not nearly as much of these guys have been dealing with. And yeah, there's not even water gathered in the curb or anything like that. But here these guys are dealing with some very severe disasters, and I think that there's quite a bit of things that people don't quite understand about what to do when this happens. I mean, you see people doing risky things like these, like getting, they see on the news that there's a horrible storm, and the first thing they think of is, okay, let's go take a look, and oh, let's go take a photo of that. And it could have easily been that this wave crushed over here, dragged this guy to the ocean and killed him. But that's what people do. That's what people don't understand, because they don't do this. They don't do preparedness seriously. Of course, most people have things in mind. Now, the first thing to understand about what's happening, especially with the floods in UK, is that it's not the first time that it's happened. All right. Actually, this article I just found a few minutes ago says praise for policemen killed in UK floods. This is from 2009. So in 2009, they obviously had some serious floods. Yeah, this police officer was redirecting traffic, and he was in a bridge, and the bridge was washed by a flood current, a flood wave, and he was dragged and drowned. Not that different from what I explained before. Someone putting himself, in this case he was putting himself in risk so as to help others. In the other case, there was no reason for that, just because of curiosity could have gotten him killed. So it's important to understand that these things have happened before. So if it happened in 2009, you could even say, well, it wasn't as bad as it is now, but if it happened in 2009, you can expect it to happen again. And if they say it was the worst storm in 50 years, 50 years, it's really not that long. It's not that much of an amount of time if you look at the bigger picture. So these things happened before, and they will continue to happen, and they will happen again. The thing is that people have very short memories. They forget about this stuff. They move a lot. They have other things in mind. This is something that I can relate to with Argentina. When the economy collapsed over there, they would say, okay, but if you look at it, this also happened in 10 years ago, but still people forget. Banks end up taking people's money, but 10 years later, people are surprised when it happens again. Let's look at some of this image actually shows some of the basic safety gear that the rescue teams are using. You see a helmet, you see a life jacket, a flotation device, and you see a headlamp. Also notice you have a boat here, and you have this guy stepping on what it's not even 4 inches of water. But notice one thing, the current. This is something that often gets underestimated. People think, okay, I put my Wellingtons on, I put my boots on, and I'm not even getting my feet wet with a little bit of basic foot protection. But the thing is that this current can be strong enough to knock you off your feet, drag you to deeper water where this boat is obviously needed, and drown you. So first of all, don't underestimate a flood. Even if it's a shallow amount of water, if it's a stronger current, it can still be enough to knock you off your feet, drag you to deeper water, and drown you. Also, the helmet is there for a reason. If you're knocked off your feet, drag, you may be hitting your head against the floor, hitting your head against posts, against walls, against debris, and that's one of the injuries that may knock you unconscious and drown you, or just kill you from the blunt trauma alone. And finally, the headlamp. A flashlight, as I said in the previous video talking about EDC, that could save your life very easily in this case. Notice how dark it is. This is because when there's of course a flooding, one of the things that is a risk is being electrocuted. So because the power is cut on purpose so as to avoid people getting electrocuted, which is a common cause of death in these cases, or maybe because the different power stations have been damaged, or the power lines are damaged. So you have flooding, you have night, and you have pitch darkness. In this case, if anything happens to you, it's very easy for you to just get lost in the darkness. Even just a few yards away, they won't be able to see you. Remember the high wind as well. Remember the sounds of the current. The high wind may be making it possible even for you to scream out loud. Even using a whistle may be lost because of those high winds. A flashlight, a strobe, is probably your best choice. It may be the difference between drowning to death or hanging there miserably for God knows how long and eventually then dying, or being rescued because you made your position noticed. It is, you see these things and you understand how it is, again, people underestimating the risk. That is the most common cause of death, because they just don't stay put, and understandably so. Sometimes staying put is not an option, especially if it's a flood that has been lasting for weeks, even months, as it's happening in some parts. Then you don't have much of a choice but to move around, and maybe you have to go across flooded places to go to work, to buy groceries, and just remember to try to avoid that as much as possible. Some people think, okay, I have a four-wheel drive vehicle, I'm okay. Even four-wheel drive vehicles have their limits. If water gets into the air intake, the vehicle's not going to be working. It's not an amphibious military vehicle that goes in both land and water. And it's very easy to go from this to this. Especially when it's raining, suddenly the current may increase, and you find yourself, you just don't see, when water is covering everything, you don't see how deep it could be. So you could easily get, just drive yourself into this situation. And here it gets ugly. Here you think, okay, I'm going to be getting out of the car if I need to. But remember, it's not easy to open the door when you have water this high. All right. And when it gets to this point, it's even worse. It may be impossible for you to open your doors because of the current. You may have to break a window and exit from there, or even if the vehicle is rolled over, the doors may be damaged and they may be locked in place, impossible for you to get out of. Not only talking about that, you're getting dragged in a can flooded with water. It's an extremely dangerous situation to be in. Avoid getting into these situations as much as you can. If you have to evacuate, it's just better to plan ahead of time and do so, and avoid getting yourself caught in this. Of course, the most fragile people, the ones that are at the greater risk, are older folks, senior citizens. They have physical limitations, people with medical conditions and such, or disabilities. They should be the ones evacuated the first. Even when the first warnings are issued, just don't risk it and find a safer place to be in. Keep that in mind, not only for yourself but for your older family members. It can be extremely dangerous for them, not only because of the actual risk we were talking about before of physical getting physically hurt. The stress alone can be enough to cause heart attacks and other kind of seizures that may end up killing them as well. Someone like this would not be able to evacuate herself from this kind of higher waters. Then we have some of the dangers indoors, like this boy, 7 years old, died as parents pumped out water. He got killed by the carbon monoxide created by the pump. A very common thing that happens, very common cause of death, not only during floods, but also during general power outages. People are trying to stay warm with an open flame on the inside without an exterior vent, and carbon monoxide builds up. People end up dying because of that. Fires are another common problem. Remember when you have water this high, when floods get to this level, the sewer water starts going up from even your toilet, your drains. You don't, in many cases, you don't even have any tap water, so you're surrounded by water, but you cannot drink any of that stuff. So water, in this case, ironically, it's a big thing to keep in mind in your preparedness. Another, well, this one actually happened today in London. This woman died because of the top structure of a building being blown out by the 80-mile wind, crushed this woman inside her vehicle. Again, whenever possible, when you have that kind of weather, try to stay put. Just don't risk it. One of the things that people ask themselves is, what could be done to prevent this? Well, you cannot blame the weather for everything. As we were saying before, these things happen. The problem is that people don't make any, getting very nice sun right now. People don't, the government is not investing as much as they should into avoiding these problems. In countries like Holland and in Netherlands and such, the Dutch are very much into understanding all this, and they have worse situations, but they plan better for them. They have flood barriers developed. They have natural barriers in place. They have so many things that can be done. Even these sustainable urban drain systems. It's basically a ditch, and it does work great. It's not that much of a problem of weather changing, which some people are on board, others are not. I'm not so much into believing it's that much of a huge climate change, even if it's possible. But it's not that much of a climate change problem as it is a problem of lack of proper infrastructure, money not being invested in, and people building in places where they have no business doing that. So it's both. It ends up being, in both cases, it's about money. It's about money not being spent where it should be spent, so as to have infrastructure to avoid these problems in the first place. It's about money being made by building and selling people real estate in places where they shouldn't have been built in the first place. And you see something like this, something so simple that if it had been built in many places, all of these problems we've been talking about could have been prevented. But you know what? It requires money, because this looks like a simple ditch with some grass in it, but someone has to dig this for miles. So someone has to dig this. It costs a lot of money to put people on work doing that. Not only that, this chunk of land could have been easily sold and maybe build 5-10 homes here, make $1 million just in this little lot of land. So you're talking about millions not being made by having drainage systems in places where a house could have been built, workers building that house, pumping the economy, another house to build, and someone going into debt with a bank so as to buy that house. So politicians like blaming the weather. I'm a little bit more about blaming the people that are responsible for putting these things in place. The other ways of flood breaks and sandbags, I suppose they worked within their limitations. It is not a final solution, and when you have floods that are very serious or that they last for a very long time, it's even the ground that's getting saturated with water, and it's coming up from the ground. So even if you have these breaks or barriers or sandbags in place, you're not going to be stopping the water from coming from the ground itself. So it's a gimmicky solution that may save some people in some cases. Not a great way of defending yourself. Finally, understand the following. As we were saying before, these things happen, and they happen often in some places. If it happened 50 years ago, it could happen again. All right. Notice one thing. Notice how the church, you know, the important building back in the day, maybe 200, 300 years ago, where was it built? It was built in high ground. And when everything else gets flooded, the places built in high ground are safe. The important buildings, the expensive ones, were built in higher ground. These guys are the ones that are suffering the flood. So if you have the choice of building yourself, and if you have no other choice but to build in a place where there's the likeliness of floods, try to build your house higher. Even better, if you build your house from scratch, make it so that it's a few feet higher than the rest of the level, and even beyond that, have the lower floor not being as essential as the first one, as the top one. All that can be accomplished with good architecture, but it has to be made ahead of time. And the last piece of advice, maybe the most important one, not being there in the first place. Avoid being there in the first place. It's not a matter of luck that I'm in a place right now where I don't even have a drop of water, you know, on the sidewalk. Even if it had been raining, of course, as it always does in Ireland, because it rains all the time. Before moving, I looked, I gathered lots of information, and this is stuff that I'm gonna be covering nicely in my book, How to Think Smart Before Moving. Before I moved, I looked over all the news regarding natural disasters of the area where I was considering, and I ended up found flood maps, flood charts, you know, maps of the region with the different flood levels of where it had gotten through the years. So I found maps going back almost 300 years ago. So when I looked at those maps and I realized the place I was looking at hadn't been flooded in 300 years, but others had been, you know, I looked at it and said, okay, if it happened 300 years ago, it could happen again. So if I am maybe 10 meters, 20 meters higher, if it's a higher ground, 20 meters or 30 meters beyond where the flood reached 300 years ago, then I'm somewhat safe to think that's not going to be happening in this location. So it's about being smart. It's about planning ahead of time. Guys, share this video with people if you think it could be of use to them, especially if you have friends that may be in flood areas or potential flood areas. And remember to subscribe. Thumbs up if you like the video. Take care and see you in our next video. Have a great day.